Hi, this is Steve Cook. You know, a few days ago, I decided I wanted to make this video. And I thought, wouldn't it be nice if I could actually show everyone what an acorn looks like? So I drove over to Memorial Park here in Houston. Now, if you've ever been to Memorial Park, you know there are oak trees everywhere, hundreds of them, maybe even thousands. Now, some of those trees have probably been standing, they've probably been standing there longer than I've been alive. They're enormous, majestic, the kind of trees that make you stop and just look up. And I thought to myself, this should be easy. I figured I'd walk around for a couple of minutes, pick one up off the ground, and head back home. Well, 45 minutes later, I was still walking, still looking, still searching. I found empty shells, I found leaves, I found twigs, but I couldn't find a single acorn, not one. And the longer I searched, the more determined I became. Because it just didn't make sense. How could there be hundreds of oak trees and not one acorn? Now, I'll be honest, I was completely puzzled. Finally, I noticed an elderly woman walking through the park, and I introduced myself and said, "Ma'am, this may sound like an unusual question, but do you know anything about acorns?" And she smiled. Not the kind of smile that says, "That's a strange question." It was the kind of smile that says, "I've been waiting a long time for someone to ask me that." Then she said something I'll never forget. She said, "It might be the mightiest seed on the planet." Now, that caught my attention. So I smiled and asked, "Well, if that's true, why can't I find one?" And she looked at me and said, "Because it's summer. Acorns don't fall until autumn." Then she smiled again and continued her walk. I thanked her and I walked slowly back to my car. And for the rest of the day, I couldn't stop thinking about that conversation because I realized nature had just taught me another lesson. Everything has a season. There's a season to plant, a season to grow, a season to mature, and eventually a season to produce fruit. Nothing in nature is rushed. Nothing blooms before its time. Everything happens exactly when it should. Then another thought crossed my mind. And if you're watching this today, there's a good chance you're either already retired or you're closer to retirement than you've ever been before. You've already lived through the seasons of building a career, raising a family, paying bills, making sacrifices, and showing up every day, even when you were tired. Now you enter another season. Not a season to start over, a season to make sure everything you spent decades building has the opportunity to become everything it was meant to become. And somehow that brought me right back to the little acorn, the one that I never found. Now, most of us, we know what an acorn looks like. It's small, it's brown, and it's about the size of the tip of your thumb. And if you saw one lying on the sidewalk, you probably walk right past it without giving it a second thought. And most people would, but because to us, it's just another seed. But to a squirrel, it's lunch. But to God, it's an oak tree. Now, think about that for just a moment. The squirrel only sees today. God sees 50 years from now. The squirrel sees a meal. God sees a masterpiece. The squirrel sees something small enough to carry away. God sees something strong enough to withstand storms. One sees what it is, the other sees what it can become. And I think that's one of the greatest lessons hidden anywhere in nature. You know, I've often wondered why Jesus taught so many of his lessons using things that grow: seeds, farmers, vineyards, fields, mustard seeds. It's because he understood something. Some of life's greatest truths can only be understood by watching how God designed nature to work. Now, look at an acorn. There's nothing really impressive about it. No one would frame it. No one would protect it in a glass display case. And most people would never even bend down to pick it up. Yet, hidden inside is an entire oak tree. Not just a trunk, not just branches, a future. Shade for families, a home for birds, strength that may outlive everyone who planted it. All of that hidden inside one tiny seed. Now, I don't know about you, but I think that's remarkable. And the older I get, the more the more respect I have for things that grow slowly, because that's usually how God works. He plants, he grows, he develops, season after season, year after year, quietly, faithfully, patiently. And maybe that's why I couldn't find an acorn that day, because before God wanted to teach me about the seed, he wanted to remind me that even seeds have seasons. Now, let me leave you with one question. If something as small as an acorn can become one of the mightiest trees in the forest, could it be that your future depends less on how much you've accumulated and more on where you've planted what you've already built. And that's where we're going next, because there's something about an oak tree that most people have seen, but very few have noticed. And once you see it, I don't think you'll ever look at an oak tree the same way again. Now, I'll see you in part 2. The tree that never starts over.